Northern New York Community Podcasts, stories from the heart of our community. It's good to have you here for another great community conversation on the Northern New York Community Podcast. I'm your host, Max Del Signor. We are fortunate to have Dani Baker with us on this episode. It would be safe to say that much like her current livelihood, her experience in philanthropy has been organic. Dani will share details on her upbringing and professional career, the creation of an agritourism destination on Wellesley Island, and the many layers of giving back. But before we visit with Dani, let's take a minute to thank our sponsors, WPBS-DT and the Northern New York Community Foundation. These interviews are made possible because of these two local organizations. Their support has created a platform to feature and share profound stories about why giving back in the North Country really matters. Go online to learn more about each organization. Head to www.WPBS-TV.org to catch up on the latest programming at WPBS, and then go to www.nnycf.org to see what the Community Foundation has to offer. Okay, let's begin our conversation with Dani Baker. Dani, it's great to have you here.
It's great to be here.
So now you are not a North Country native. Can you tell us just a little bit about where you grew up and a little bit about your family?
I grew up in northern Westchester County near New York City, but I am kind of a part-time North Country native because we spent our summers in the Adirondacks, in the foothills of the Adirondacks, where both my parents worked at a resort hotel. So I grew up there summers, and I fell in love with the North Country through that experience. And when I was 27 and finally took a stab at independence, I moved to Clinton County, and through work ended up in Jefferson County in '93, and here I am.
What did you love the most about the Adirondacks growing up as a kid and the time you spent here?
You know, just spending time outdoors. We had a big white pine forest right near it was like a little cottage where we stayed. There was an ice barn. They cut ice from the lake, and don't tell anybody, but they cut ice from the lake, stored it under sawdust in a barn under a lot of shade, like it was on the edge of a ridge, and then they'd put it in the water for the guests.
Really?
This is before the health police, I think. They'd chop it up, and it would be in these big glasses of water, and an iced tea also for the guests. So we would play in there, and we'd go berry picking. Then there was a golf course, and across the road up on a little ridge, we'd walk on the path and collect golf balls, and Did you ever unstring a golf ball?
No, I've never.
Well, if the top is cut, you can peel it off, and then there's like a rubber band that circles it countless times, and then right in the middle is a colored rubber ball with liquid inside. Once you get it going, because there's like a lot of cement or glue that holds it, but once you get it going, you can kind of do like this, and the rubber ball kind of unwinds by itself. Yeah. So we do that, and I don't know. I knew all the good berry patches and.
So where'd that love of the outdoors come from?
Well, because that's where we were. You didn't want to stay inside unless it was a rainy day. So, and I had time, and even in northern Westchester, the house that my parents bought when I was about 5 had just been built on what had been a cornfield. And then down the hill, there were woods, and there was a pond in the woods and all this stuff. And I just wandered around. I was kind of a loner as a child, so I spent a lot of time just wandering around and observing nature and immersing myself in it.
Adventurous.
Well,
Curious,
yeah. One day I found some corn in an indentation of a rock, and I brought it home. I thought the Indians had left it. I thought that was where they ground their corn, and here was the last,
you had a
remnant
piece of
it.
history there.
Well, of course it wasn't, but yeah.
Still that curiosity as a child and being outside. Interesting to the connection to the Adirondacks too. Did you know after completing college and your courses of study that I need to get back there? This is where I love to be, and I had such good memories of being up there.
We moved to White Plains, which was a city for high school, and then I chose, because I was naive about my own needs, to go to college in a city, and then I went to graduate school in a city, and none of that was really good for my mental health. So when I got to the point where I wanted to be a happier person, I thought of the mountains where I was always happy. And so I happened to know one person who'd moved up to the area, so I didn't go up without knowing anyone at all. And so that's what I decided to do. And it was a good choice. And I've been in the country ever since.
Haven't left.
Yeah, I'm just a country girl at heart.
What do you remember about your parents or family or even friends and the way that they would either give back or help others in any of the communities that you lived in?
Well, I remember one incident with my mother. We were in Peekskill shopping for food or something, and we were in a parking lot, and there was an old woman digging through a garbage, looking for food. And my mother said, "I'll be right back." She went out of the car and she gave the woman some money. So that was, kind of a very dramatic memory that I have of helping. My mother was pretty involved with volunteering in the community. We didn't have any money to give away, but she gave a lot of her time. She was a Girl Scout leader for, right up through my high school years. And she was involved with the PTA, and she even got involved with politics a little bit. I think it was a school board election, and she had like a reception at her home for a candidate. And yeah, she was pretty involved with the community. So that was a role model, even though I haven't done as much along those lines as she did. And then Lou Sarnoff. Now, this was a friend of my mother had befriended his wife-to-be back when they were both single and in their 20s anyway. And my mother kept touch with Stephanie and then Lou over the years, and he was a self-made, very, very wealthy man who ended up, one of the owners of Time Warner. I don't know how many million shares of stock he had, but and he was a benefactor for our family, and he gave us shares of stock to help us pay for our college, all three of me and my two siblings, and their family would give us their appliances when they had replaced them, which were perfectly new to us, but so we had a refrigerator, and then when we bought that house, they gave us money to put wall-to-wall wool carpet in it. So I just had that role model of someone who was just a kind, giving person, and, just because of the friendship. I mean, I don't know. So that was a real role model for me, I will say.
Did any of that experience impact your decision to pursue, studies in psychology and the career that you chose?
I don't know.
Is there a different reason to choose
My mother
that
encouraged me. I was a declared math major when I went to college, and I was pretty good in math. And I was placed a year, and I didn't have a good experience in linear algebra, which was second semester my freshman year, and that's when I decided to do something else. I was taking sociology at the time, which I fell in love with the grand theories. And then my mother encouraged me to do something, like I told you, I was kind of a loner. She encouraged me to do something where I'd be working with people. So it was between social work and psychology, and a professor of mine advised me to, he was an expert on stratification, social stratification, and he advised me to go for the higher level degree and also to go to an Ivy League school if I could, because of that whole social status thing that I don't know. So I just followed his advice, and that's what happened.
The first question is the why. So what led you to come back to the North Country and to see the farm in particular?
Well, I came back to the North Country in 1978. That's when I moved to Clinton County, and I worked for. I'll answer your first question now. I worked for an association for retarded children, and I was a program manager there, running a day treatment program for adults, developmentally disabled adults. That really taught me how dedicated people who work for not-for-profits are. I mean, you don't make a lot of money, and you work above and beyond the call to serve your clients. And I think that's universally true of not-for-profits. And I don't think the people who work there, I mean, they deserve all the credit for how they give of themselves. And so, I was part of that for a period of time. So I came out here in '93, and I worked for the prison system. And then I was thinking about retiring, and I'm a really active, energetic person, and I was I was really terrified of having a lot of idle time with no structure. So I thought, well, if I have some land, I can, maybe get a couple of horses, I can do a little landscaping. So when we came to see the property on the island, the first thing, first I looked at the topo map and I saw 80 feet of elevation on one of the ridges, and I thought, oh, this is like, I wanted something with some difference. I didn't want flat. And when we got to the property, right on the road was a rocky ridge, and I ran right up it, and it was like being on the top of a foothill of the Adirondacks. And I just fell in love with the land right away. And of course, the house was a money pit. It was an old farmhouse. I was depressed for 2 years over that, but yeah.
How difficult was it to start the farm?
Well, I had gardened as a child. My father had a heart attack when we were preschoolers. And so in those days, in the 50s, they told men, oh, take it easy for the rest of your life. So he didn't do any physical labor. And my mother was a 5-foot-tall, petite woman. And so I was the oldest and the strongest. So I got to, new house on a cornfield. So I got to pitchfork over all the flower beds and the garden and dig all the holes for the landscaping trees. And so I grew up doing that, and I really enjoyed it. And whenever, in the rest of my adulthood before the farm, whenever I had a plot of land I could do something with, I had a small garden or a big garden, depending. Anyway, so for me to have a vegetable garden was really nothing.
Was it the added elements that you wanted to build out that took a little more time? And
well, then of course we did a garden in the first year, and we sold some stuff, and it was like, oh, this is easy. So then we doubled the size of it, or quadrupled it, I don't even remember right away, and planted more stuff. And then my partner wanted animals, and so we got, the chickens and the cows and the pigs and the goats and the ducks, and we had turkeys at one time. And then I had the 7-year itch, and I wanted to do something new, and I took a class about permaculture, and I thought, that's it, I'm going to have an edible forest. And so that's my baby currently.
So 102 acres approximately, right, for the farm?
Right.
And your partner, David Belding,
Yep.
right? This has been your venture for
12 years. This
12
is the 12th
years.
season. Yep.
What's the future hold?
I got to tell you, this is very relevant to our discussion. So I mentioned working for the ARC back in the 80s, and the program was changing under my feet, where we were expanding, and the state that had all of the power to choose clients wanted to have medically impaired people who needed pretty much total care. And this was not what I wanted to do. So I wanted to have people who could walk and talk and go potty by themselves, and maybe had behavior problems. I was a psychologist after all, who you could shape. You could maybe help them become more adjusted to society and actually advance themselves. So it wasn't the population I wanted to work with, so I quit. And I had it took some time before I was able to, decide what I wanted to do next and get another job. And I had this mantra at that time. Well, first of all, I was 35 when I quit the job. And at that time I said, salary and benefits is no reason to stay. If that's all it is, it's no reason to stay at a job. So I had this mantra that I said, I want to become independently wealthy by my own efforts in my own lifetime, so I can spend all my time doing good works for nothing. That was my mantra. Because for me, the farm is spending all my time doing good works for nothing. And because I saved a lot of money, basically from my employment, I can also do good works monetarily. And so I'm really proud of myself for basically fulfilling that mantra goal that I set.
And
it was
quite
in
amazing.
the midst of a hypomanic episode.
But nonetheless, here we are.
That's right.
How does the farm, give back to the community?
Part of our mission statement is education, and we do a lot of education. We do tours, and we have school groups come and college groups, and I do workshops. So we're educating the community about how to raise, healthy food in a way that's kind to the environment. So we're giving back in that way, and then we're producing a quantity of very healthy food to feed people. Also, we're on an island, and we have a windmill. We produce our own power, and actually right now we're in the process of, we're tied to the grid at the moment, but we're going to be doing some additions so that we can actually switch it to off the grid, and get power, utilize the power we're producing off the grid. So if there was some emergency where, let's say, the power grid went down for some reason, whether it was a natural disaster or a man-caused disaster, we could actually pump water for our neighbors. We could, keep our food fresh and frozen in our refrigerators, our freezers, so we could share that. So, I feel like, we're planning to be a help to our local community even more if we had some kind of crisis where that kind of help was needed.
Well, at one time in a previous discussion that we had, you said that there is a hope long term that maybe either another couple or family might be able to take on what you and David have put together.
Yes, but we have to become profitable.
Before anything.
Well, if it's going to continue, it has to be profitable because, even if someone's well-meaning who wants to take it over, if there's not a way to make a living at it, it's not realistic that it will continue. I mean, we can do it. Dave works off the farm and I have a pension. That's how we can afford to be farmers at the moment.
To transition, you've also dealt with some personal tragedy in your life. Your son, Marc, committed suicide when he was 21, excuse me. And you give back to community projects, programs, in many ways as a way to recognize your son.
That's right.
How did losing a son impact your giving?
Well, I had one child and he's dead. So I have no heirs. There's nobody to leave anything to. I live very frugally. There's nothing I want. And I saved quite a bit of money because I did have a good salary working for the prison, and I thought that I would not be eligible for any kind of financial support when my son was ready for college. So I invested money so that I'd be able to pay for him to go to a private school. Well, for 4 years. Well, when he died, and he had flunked out of 2 or 3 schools along the way, and so I didn't have a reason to use that money anymore. So that was kind of the nest egg that I decided I was going to give away. And I wanted to commemorate his life in some way. For me, having his name on things that, on mostly structures that had some meaning to him or in our relationship, it just has a lot of meaning for me. So that's what I started doing. And one of the first things I did, I think, was fund a timer for the school at Thousand Islands, because when he was young, he was a racer. He raced, and he swam races. So that was meaningful, and he always cared about the environment. So I've helped now more than one environmental agency, preserve land or educate people about conservation.
Can you share a little bit about the reading room at DePauville Library?
Sure, yeah. Well, so when we moved to a different town, I was a single parent, and we moved to a different town when my son was entering 2nd grade. And I go to the first teacher conference, and they told me he was in the lowest reading group. And I knew he was a bright kid. I said, why is that? Well, he can't read, and the other kids can. I said, well, is he in remedial reading? No. Well, put him in remedial reading. So the problem was that the curriculum was different in the old school system, and they hadn't prepared kids for the level of reading that was expected with the curriculum in the school he entered for 2nd grade. So when DePauville wanted to renovate a room to provide remedial reading to kids, it was a no-brainer for me, to reach out to support that effort, because I know how important it was for my son. Oh, I didn't mention, so by the end of the semester, he was in the highest reading group, because he just needed that extra help. And I think a lot of kids are in the same boat. And they need a facility for this to take place. So I was happy to fund this, and it just was really meaningful. So anyway, that's the story about the DePauville Library.
Can you share a little bit too about some of the other projects you mentioned, whether it be to honor your son or just good community projects that you see as a resident, what compels you to give to support some of those programs or
look,
projects?
I went to write a will many years ago and to a lawyer, and I said, I have this kayak I want to give to a girlfriend. And he said, Dani, if you have something you want to give somebody, don't wait till you die. Give it to them now. And I thought, I just totally overgeneralized that. So, I'm self-insured for a nursing home. So I have a certain number that I like to keep in savings, just in case I need to fund that. And beyond that, what am I going to do with it? So I just give it away. And that's, why not? Rather than leave it in my will, that's silly. If I can, I'd rather decide where it goes than somebody else. So that's it. And, I've been just very fortunate in, I manage my own finances, and I've been very fortunate, to, I won't call it lucky, but to have been, I've been successful in my choices. And so I have extra. And I'll read an article in the paper like, okay, so the SUNY ESF was looking for funding for a dormitory on Governor Island so that they could house students on the island who were working there. And of course that was, an environmental activity. I'm very interested in that. So I called up the development guy, and, he showed me around. I thought, yeah, I'd like to do that. So, and then, the IRLC, the Indian River Lakes Conservancy, needed money to purchase a 42-acre island in one of the Indian River Lakes that was going to be open to the public but preserved forever. That was sort of a no-brainer. So I gave them a house. I had dabbled in some rental real estate. So I gave them, actually it was I think it was a rental property that I owned. I really didn't want to deal with selling it, so I gave it to them. They sold it. They got the money. They bought the island. So that worked out.
How does it feel to help these organizations? Again, you have this affinity for nonprofits, as you mentioned before, so to be able to help them move ahead, how does it make you feel to be able to do this?
Couldn't you tell by my enthusiasm when I just described that?
Even so, I still want to make sure I ask the question.
I don't know. I just feel good if I believe in the project and it's going to be lasting. I like to do things that are going to be lasting because I have no heirs, so I like to do things that, are going to persist, hopefully long into the future.
You've said before, giving to things that appreciate.
Yes,
right?
Appreciate, right, rather than depreciate. Like the hospital, A-Bay Hospital, they, they have this wonderful program for active servicemen and women and now veterans to help them with post-traumatic stress disorder. Now, I'm pretty sure that my son had that from an incident that happened when he was in high school, where two of his classmates died. And I don't think he ever dealt with it. In fact, he's not the only one who killed himself. Another young man who was part of that friendship group killed himself. So I know there's something that went on there that was never resolved. And it just, and the art therapy for me is such a wonderful medium, because these are things, my son certainly couldn't talk about it. These are things that people can't always talk about, but if they can express it through some other medium, then at least they can get it out in the open and examine it. So I was lucky to be able to support, that capital project there, particularly the art therapy room that they're going to be building. So that's another example. But there's so many. I think there's 3 or 4 churches that, one has a roof and one has an air conditioning system and one has I don't know what that I've helped. And again, they're all capital projects. The Opera House, when they had their big capital campaign, that was the biggie. For me then, after this meeting, I'm going over to the SPCA and see how I can help them out.
What does the word philanthropy mean to you?
Well, first of all, I always have trouble pronouncing it. Just, it means giving money to worthy causes.
Do you feel that your giving has been organic? I know we made the tie at the very beginning with the intro, but it seems very fluid. When there's certain things that you see, you feel like that's an area where you can support. Will it always be that way too? you feel like that's part of your philanthropy and your giving back? When you see something good, here's a chance to help somebody else?
Well, I like to be the one to take the initiative. Mm-hmm. I really don't feel comfortable when people ask me, as a rule. I'd rather discover the need and take the initiative and go to them and, say, find out more about it. And then, I mean, it also has to do with, what kind of funds I have available at the time. Like when my checking account starts building up in excess, then I start looking for a way to get rid of it.
How important is...
Sorry, it's just the way it is. It's true.
No, it's good. It's true.
Well, I got to tell you, when I was young, my parents taught me to save. But they never taught me to save with a goal. It was like saving for saving's sake. And I saved half my salary when I was employed, when I had a good salary. I mean, I just saved it with no particular objective in mind other than saving for my son's college. But that was just part of my savings. And now I kind of have a goal for my savings, which is to find worthy causes and help them.
Do you think that's an important lesson that the younger generation needs to take note of? If you have an opportunity to help others, just by saving a little bit, the impact behind what you're able to give to somebody else can be so meaningful?
If you say so.
So how important is some of these great lessons? Like you said, saving was a big key for you, and being able to have the resources to do what you're doing now is important to you and to these
I want to say
other
something else
communities.
about that. May I interrupt?
Sure, go ahead.
So when I was about to retire, I had to see a therapist because I was freaking out, not only about having so much leisure time, but what am I going to do when I can't save money anymore, honestly. And so she said, she's very wise, she said, well, Dani, there are other ways to conserve. That helped me, except that, yes, I can find other ways. So I conserve in my farming life, and I conserve by helping conservation organizations, and I'm sure there are other ways I conserve without actually, but I still save money because I don't live on what I have. And boy, when I hit 70 and I start collecting Social Security, I have no need for that. And just wait, community. No, and then when I'm 70 and a half and I have to start taking my RMDs, I have no need for that. So, I'm just going to have to, look further for ways to dispose of it.
Well, and even with the financial contributions and being able to give back that way, and the farm especially, you do spend a little time volunteering, but serving on boards and committees too. I mean, you're involved with AAUW.
Right. No, I don't do any committee work there, but no, I was on the board of the IRLC for about 6 years, and I still support them on a voluntary basis. And yes, I'm on a committee for the Opera House, and I don't want to be on any more boards, but I'm on a committee for the Opera House and for the Art Museum in Clayton. And actually, I just joined the development committee for the Nature Center, so I'm excited about that.
Very nice. So what would your message be to the next generation coming up? What message would you impart about why it's so important to give back to your community and to the place where you live?
Well, when I was young, I gave back for work, working for not-for-profit in that regard. But I wasn't that involved with the community, nor did I, have funds to, be a philanthropist with. But since I started doing it, both kinds of things, and the farm as well. The people you meet, the relationships you form when you're doing those kinds of things are priceless. And, I think just for that, to get out in the community and volunteer in some fashion, and then, being to help when you're in a position financially to help with any kind of worthy cause, even helping to raise money. That's very important. And that's more volunteering than actually donating, but your time rather than your financial assets. But I think, that is so essential for the health of the community.
You mentioned before about building a legacy. The farm is part of that equation. What do you hope the legacy of Dani Baker is?
Well, I certainly hope my edible forest garden will live on as a model for sustainable agriculture, sustainable perennial agriculture. That I've actually been thinking of that as being my legacy because it's something I created directly, and it's alive and it's growing. I mean, it's going to grow whether I'm there or not, and but it still needs caretaking. So I hope that I can arrange for some way that it will be cared for, and it will be, the lessons from it will continue to be disseminated to the general public. And then as far as the rest goes, if my son's name is here and there and elsewhere, and then now I've moved on. My mother's, there's going to be a trail named after my mother, and then now it's Cross Island Farms. So I'd like the business to be recognized, into the future. Maybe that will help it survive into the future as well.
Well, it's really remarkable, the scope of what you've done, particularly here in the North Country. And the community is certainly so much greater because of your generosity and the time you've put into it. And I encourage folks to go to Cross Island Farms on Wellesley Island to see you, because it is pretty remarkable, the site, and to see the edible garden. It's really pretty fantastic. You should be proud of that great work.
Thank you.
And thanks for coming here on the podcast to share your story. We appreciate your time.
Thank you.
We were glad to have you join us for another edition of the Northern New York Community Podcast. Remember, each interview can be downloaded for free anytime on your mobile device or listened to online. Type in Northern New York Community Podcast when you search for us on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, or other podcast platforms. Also, check out our website featuring interview highlights, transcripts, photo galleries, and much more. Just go to www.nnycpodcast.com. Our thanks again to Dani Baker, and thanks to all of you for listening to the Northern New York Community Podcast. Northern New York Community Podcast. Stories from the heart of our community.